Hello, neighbor. Welcome back to That Witch Podcast. I'm Danny, the witch next door, and I'll be your host for this very special episode of the show. Today, we are going to be joined by a very, very dear friend of mine, Cera Marquez of CC Oddities by Cera. And this is actually not the first time Cera has been with us in the neighborhood. Long ago, way back in season 2, Cera was a guest and we talked about her business, CC Oddities by Cera, kind of the oddities industry and taxidermy. And, this new episode is so insanely timely. And this is particularly funny and magical because, first of all, Cera and I recorded this episode back in October 2025. And we were nearing the end of October. And I knew that I was going to take a break from the podcast. And I really wanted to save it for just like a really good, really buzzy, really busy time on the show because it's such a good episode. And what I did not know was that I was going to be taking an impromptu extended break from the podcast and kind of undergoing a massive rebirth of sorts. And when I went back to look at the date, the exact day that I dropped the episode for Cera and I in season 2, I released it on February 18th, 2022. And this turned out to be, it was not necessarily like the biggest intention of the episode, but what ended up happening was it became this like beautiful then and now and like huge glow up and story of transformation for Cera and in so many ways myself. And we end up sharing so much of our own personal death and rebirth while talking about death and grief work and loss. So even though I had different plans for timing of release of this episode, it has turned out to be the most divine and perfect timing. I'm so excited to be sharing this with you at the start of Taurus season, the opposite of Scorpio season, this beautiful halfway like arc through the zodiac since Cera and I actually recorded it during this season that's so associated with death and rebirth. And we really don't think about the death part as much in Taurus season. We really think about and appreciate it for the life, for the rebirth part of it. But this can be and is such a powerful time to think about our deaths and our losses, both figuratively and physically. This is actually a really beautiful and sacred time to reflect on, memorialize, and honor your dead. Again, your loved ones that you've lost, and also the parts of you. So I'm very honored to bring you our next episode in That Witch Podcast as our show and my business and content is all going under massive rebirth and transformation itself. I'm so excited to hear what you think and how you feel and just share this incredible journey of progress with one of my very dear friends here in the witchy community. I hope you enjoy. And everything that you need to follow and subscribe and support Cera and connect more will be in the show notes below. And without further ado, here we go. Hello, my wonderful magical neighbor. Welcome back for another very special episode of That Witch podcast. If this is your very first time here before, consider yourself very lucky. What a good episode to get to stumble upon our witchy little neighborhood here for. If you don't know me already, I'm Danny. I'm That Witch Next Door. I'll be your host, your guide, your mentor, your spiritual bestie in all things modern witchcraft, cosmic living, your favorite neighborhood Death Witch, and I have one of my favorite Death Witch pals here with me today. If you've been a long-time listener of That Witch podcast, this is a very special returning guest episode that I am really, really honored to have back here. Cera is someone I consider to be such a good personal friend of mine, and both of us are in this professional spiritual space, but in very, very unique ways. And I'm excited for her to get to share more about that with you. But Cera, please say hello to everybody. And we still have a little tradition around here. If you would share your big three with all of us too.
Oh, love that. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Cera. It's Cera with a C. And my big three is wet. It's a Pisces sun, a Pisces moon, and a Scorpio rising.
Oh my God, I love it. And that's where so much of my connection with you is, because we are watery little babies. we are watery little babies. So Cera, first, will you just start by letting us know what it is that you do? And then we're going to kind of do a little back in time stuff too. But first, will you just kind of let everybody know what it is that you do?
Absolutely. I am a small business owner. I have owned my business for over 4 years now. We celebrated our 4th birthday in August. The business is kind of hard to put under one capsule. LOL capsule though. But I am a death doula in Denver. I support and educate for grief education, death advocacy, death awareness, providing people with tools, resources that they might not be aware. Art, I process, preserve all my materials that I use, bones, pin the bugs, dry the flowers, and put it all together. And then when I present these in the world at in-person markets and such, it's kind of a segue for me to have deeper conversations around death as well. So lots of death.
I love it. And I love it so much. So on our first episode we did together, which was, I believe, at the end of 2021. I'm pretty sure it was the end of 2021, not the beginning of 2022. But it was very early into the start of That Witch podcast. I think that what we had really focused on was being in the business of oddities in a lot of ways. And I think that we talked about, the different taboo aspects, the stigma around death, especially in the pieces that you create. And then when we were reconnecting and getting this podcast episode prepped for, you mentioned that you have sort of started becoming this pet undertaker. Can you share with us a little bit to start off with that metamorphosis, how that kind of came to be from where you were a few years ago at the start of your business and how it's gotten to where it is now?
Yeah, it's been such an evolution, such a ride. And I did go back to our first episode that we had recorded years ago. to kind of like read on like where I was then. And it's just so insane to hear that version and to be where I'm at now. Still very explorative in the career and still don't know quite what the end will look like, but I definitely know the direction we're heading more clearly nowadays. And it all goes back to those dang bugs that I had in that episode. I did talk about the beetles that I raised that do the bone processing for me. And that's what I used for the majority of my art then, and definitely all of my art now. And over time, it started to develop into so shortly after our first recording, I realized that that's when I started working at the funeral home, like a few months after that.
Yes.
And I feel like that really kind of set me in a different direction and a new perspective. And I was really fortunate and so thankful for that time working for the funeral home. But I also quickly realized being there that it wasn't the exact space that I wanted to be in. And so then that's when I started to lean in more, exploring what are my other options like within this realm. And so that's when I landed on Death Doula, started pursuing that certification, which then created a bigger canopy that I could play around with underneath about what my death career looks like. And so then it started just kind of naturally evolving towards pet memorials, offering alternative to cremation. Since I was processing all to that, and I helped my first client later that year in 2022. And it's just evolved. At this point, I've helped almost 100 pet loss clients. I have created some very unique experiences and services for people. And quite honestly, Danny, like what is really not cease to amaze me, and I don't think it ever will, but like it's truly the creativity of my clients and them coming to me with these unique ideas that I can tell they have probably never really talked about out loud to many people, if any at all. And to be able to even just facilitate those conversations where they can kind of like in their head feel like, wow, this is really weird. This is really strange. We're having these really off conversations, but like to be able to facilitate those and hold that space and answer those questions in a comforting, not abnormal way has been so soul fulfilling. But then also then bringing that to completion and then seeing their face when it's brought to life and I've helped their pet transition into their new form on this earth. And it's just pretty insane. I'm honestly still soaking it in, and I feel like it's honestly the end of this year that I've really leaned into finding my confidence to be more loud and proud about that work and lean into 2026 like leading with that foot first. So I'm really excited to see where this is going. And yeah, it's definitely evolved and it's going to keep evolving, but it's really cool where it's at right now.
I have so many places that I want to go already. I even just hearing you talk about it, I like already get like that watery lump in my throat because anybody that is a pet person and pets are a part of your family, you can already start to empathize with how special and how sacred and how healing this work and this service must be for your clients. We lost our dog like a year and a half ago, and it's still like just dagger in my heart. And her memorial sits behind me every single day. And it's such an important part of the grief process is my version of memorializing her. So I just think that what you're doing is like one of the most special things, seriously, in the world. I really do. So before I like bawl my eyes out, I want you to tell everybody, because I'm familiar with this term death doula, but there are so many listeners that have either heard that and have no idea what it still is, or this is the very first time that they're hearing it. And it's something that I think is incredible. Will you explain a little bit about what a death doula can be? Because I know that can be kind of an umbrella that can get even more specific, but what does that overall look like? And if you don't mind, what did the process of that certification look like for you?
Yeah. So I definitely think the easiest way to like transcribe this is I think more people are familiar with a birth doula. And so, and if you're not, a birth doula is someone that's helping someone bring new life into this world. And so death doula is just the opposite end of that. And it's someone that helps you, guides you to the end of your life. And that can be support for the family, that can be support for any of the loved ones involved, as well as the dying person themselves too. And so for the certification process, it's honestly kind of simple. There's a lot of courses that are offered online. It's just a matter of paying that cost and having that time. Mine was a 3-month course. And then from that point, that kind of, because it's not necessarily like, okay, I got this certification and now I got the job, just like college. When we graduate college, you got to still kind of find your way and seek it out and network and connect. And that's the part that did excite me, because that's the part I'm comfortable with. That's the part I know how to do. And so once I got over the building block of like, okay, establishing myself of like, this is the new plateau we're working with, then it was from that point, reaching out, building my clientele. And yeah, so that's basically kind of summarizing in a simple sorts of what that entails and what that looks like.
What I'm really curious about in that path is, did you or have you noticed at any time that the more you embark on and grow your death doula practice, but just your sacred death practices in general, do you notice, does it bring up your own like grief and death work on a personal level that you have to do for yourself?
Absolutely. Honestly, this art form has always been an outlet for my own grief, and it's been a matter of me managing that internally. And that's honestly, I'm really proud of myself for that too. Over the past 3 years, like honestly, since our last recording, like I've done therapy. I have been really doing the work to heal internally, because I knew that I was so passionate about moving forward in this path. And to do that, I would have to create space within myself to hold the space for others and heal my own grief, which, grief never goes away. It's just something we learn to work with and live with. And so really honing in on that and expanding my own personal communities. I shared in the first podcast we had that my business was born out of the death of my dad. So that was definitely, and that I am birthday for my business this year. It was the 5th year without him. And it just kind of hit, like, you just think, okay, yeah, like I'm 5 years in, I'm a veteran now at this point with the grief. And it's like, no, once I realized I was like half a decade without my dad, and that just kind of hit. But I've really leaned into communities that are definitely around. You just kind of have to look for them. I found a loss of parent group that I have. It started as a support group, and now is literally just a group of friends that can relate to me on such a way that I have never been understood or been able to speak with before. And just really understanding that like a big part of my healing is verbal processing. Like I don't need an opinion. I don't need input. I just need to say it out loud so it doesn't manifest into something within me. And just like, yeah, doing that internal work so that I can do the external work too and move forward with the direction of all of this that I see. And just ultimately really proud of myself for all of this work. Like I could just really feel it. Like I met with 2 clients this week alone to send memorials back home, which is always my favorite part. But just being able to hold that space for them and see it in their eyes, the meaning, the deep meaning that these offerings mean to them. It's just continuing to affirm me. Like the work I'm doing for myself is showing to others and coming out the way that I want it to be reflected. And it's just so powerful once you really start leaning into your own healing to heal others too.
I love that. Once you lean into your own healing to help heal others. Wow. That's a beautiful way to say that. So I also am curious, have you noticed or experienced throughout this time then of kind of sheddings or deaths of versions of yourself along the way? Has that been kind of a part of this too?
Yeah, actually, I have a podcast too, and I had released an episode kind of closing that chapter because the first season, which is the 10 episodes, like was recorded over the course of 2 years. So there was definitely versions that existed. And that last episode that I just recently put out was I titled it Public Funeral for myself. It was a funeral that I made public, sharing really deep, intimate, personal things about my own journey to get where I am now. And it definitely has been a lot of versions and saying goodbye to those versions. And I think that the more that I've shed those shells, like the more confident I get in just like that cycle. Like that's just something that happens. And I feel like I lean into it more and more, and like the faster the shells are falling, which is fine. Like that's great, because then that just means I'm accelerating to be the person that I'm supposed to be. And but yeah, definitely. And I know that you share also the freedom from alcohol. That was definitely something that I acknowledge very hugely as a big piece of my personal healing, was letting go my relationship with alcohol and just finally admitting that didn't have any space in my life and didn't help what I wanted to be growing towards. So,
so I really, I love talking about this because, you know, when you hear about what a death witch is, which again is honestly a way broader umbrella than you can usually fully conceptualize it. You can get really specific within that, but it makes sense that a death witch is somebody on the surface that works with dead beings, dead entities, the concept of death. Naturally, you could probably start to connect that your own grief work comes up. But what I never saw coming on a personal level was this like living death that I would experience, and I will always continue to experience, of these versions of yourselves, these shells, like you say, that you grow out of and away from. And I love that you titled the episode and this concept of having a funeral for yourself. That's I like love that. So that's probably the Hades witch in me, because I'm like, what a fantastic concept, and what a powerful method of healing and shadow work to do. I hope that a ton of people take that idea and run with that, and like have a funeral for a past version of yourself. I love that you brought up freedom from alcohol, and that's such a wonderful way to word it too, because that's exactly. I don't feel like I'm serving a punishment in sobriety and recovery. I feel like free from my own prison. Honestly, it's totally a freedom thing. But at the same time, in my years, as I continue on and add on a day at a time without alcohol, these next waves and next level of healing and processing and personal grief come up. And one of the most recent ones that came up for me that I never saw coming in a million years was my body and circadian rhythms now that I don't fuck with them so much because I don't put alcohol in my system every day anymore. And now that my circadian rhythms can like do their own natural thing, I am a morning person. I have lived and died by this. I'm a night owl. I'm a night owl. I'm a night owl my whole entire life. And I probably, and I was for a long time, but I was like clinging to that so strongly lately, like really, really having a hard time letting go of the part of my life where I stayed up late into the night. I mean, I was being like particularly stubborn about it. I cried about it. I like threw a little fit about it because I was just like, I miss that. I miss that. I miss that so much. And I didn't word it as a funeral, but God, I love that so much. But that was what I had to do. That was what I had to do is I had to lay that to rest. I had to really face it, really speak it. I'm a verbal processor as well, as you know, and as probably everybody knows since I'm chatty on here. But I needed to say that out loud and face that. And it was so funny because once I finally did, I realized that like my time with the darkness and the night hours weren't gone. They just shifted because now once I surrendered to that and let it go, I like naturally get up like 2 hours before everybody now. And I have the nice, dark, quiet house to myself again. That same feeling I was craving and so sad that I didn't have anymore. But yeah, this is exactly why I want to talk to you about this stuff today, because I don't know when we talk about death witchcraft or death and grief work, we really kind of limit it in our minds to the process of literally somebody dying or passing away and then the grief process afterwards, which is absolutely a huge part of it. But what I wanted to shed light on today was what it surfaces in us. And all of a sudden you realize, because this is what I see in you, like all of a sudden you realize you're this person who just walks hand in hand with death every single day. And I just think that's such a powerful, such a cool thing. So speaking of that, in your own personal transformation over these last 4 and 5 years, what has been, or what was maybe some of the hardest things that you did have to let go of and grow from, but now you can see so much clearer in hindsight? Is it alcohol? Is it more than that? What does that kind of look like?
Alcohol was definitely one of the biggest and the hardest to get rid of. It had wildly been a part of my life for 20 years. So it was a pretty long instilled in my body habit to knock. And even like months after, even a year after being sober, like I would notice that sometimes in certain situations that in the past I had drank, my body almost felt like, oh, we're drinking. And I could feel like my heart rate go up. Like I could still feel the sensations within me as if like, we're going to drink. And I'm just like, no, we're not, And so that was a very interesting thing. But also, yeah, in my podcast episode with my funeral, like I do touch on that there is death that isn't literal person dying death that can create grief, can create that disconnection from who you knew and who you are now. And during that time, like in 2020, it was back to back to back. And then it just continued and it keeps continuing, to be honest. And it's just learning to work with that and being okay with that. Every time these things happen, those shells are shutting. Like we're turning into a new version of ourselves. And the alcohol one being the biggest one, though, has really led me to feel that I've completely reborn. Like I don't even recognize who I was 2-3 years ago. I honestly feel, and I say that it feels like I'm learning to socialize and learning to see and feel and be all over again. Like I'm a toddler.
Yes.
And it's kind of amazing though, once I realized that, and I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. Like, we're just raising ourselves all over again. It's like a new chance to raise yourself right. But yeah, death and the grief from the death comes in many forms, and not just literal passing through the veil death. It can be loss of living people. And I actually was just talking about that this week. And sometimes that can be the hardest, to have grief with something or someone that's still living, because it's just so uniquely different to have that disconnection and that grief and that loss, but know that they are still of this realm. And that still can be categorized under your grief, under your loss, under your death, under redefining who you are now because of that.
That's such a good and valuable point, because exactly, I think we attach the concept of grief so exclusively to physical, literal death of a life that we have a hard time processing what's happening for us when we are experiencing a different type of loss, and it's bringing up grief, but we're having a hard time conceptualizing that, because we're attaching grief to, well, nobody died, and we can kind of start to gaslight ourselves. Well, nobody died. I'm making such a big deal. Everything's okay. And it's like, it's so helpful when you can pause and take a step back and go, oh, this is grief. I'm grieving right now. And when you know that and own that and just stand in that, it is a lot. Easy is not the right word, but for lack of a better term, it's easier to respond to yourself. It makes more sense how to, I think it makes it a little easier to have a little more grace with yourself, honestly, when you realize that. And when you're kind of fighting against it, it's easy to kind of gaslight yourself, like, oh, I don't, what's the matter with me or whatever. And the truth is exactly, loss, that's such a great way to put it. Loss of a living person. You could mic drop right there. But there's so many, you could lose a home, and you could lose that home because it was taken away from you, or you were kicked out, or it was time to move away. You chose to move away. And it's still this loss, right? And there's this grief period that goes into it. We put our everything into manifesting and then following through with our move. It was the right thing. I get confirmation for that all the time. I feel that in my bone of bones. There's still huge grief work that has been and continues to be done there, though. When you move away from your childhood home or away from your state, or what, you have that experience. You moved away from your home state. There is this grieving period that takes place. Honestly, again, it's not, grief doesn't automatically mean that something quote unquote bad happened. And I think that's what happens as death practitioners. We stop automatically labeling all death as bad. And I think we start, do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, we kind of start opening up to death as this just natural part of our life and our universe, and grief as being this natural part of that process, just as much as the rebirth and the life that recurs afterwards is also a part of that process. I don't know. I just learned so much from all this stuff.
A lot like the death tarot card.
Yes.
Right? Don't you feel like the death tarot card can be such a good symbolic representation of our experiences with death and the grief with that? I think that grief can come from anything that changes who we once were, whatever that may be. The routines that we used to know, the acts we used to go through daily, or what have you, the people we used to communicate with, anything that kind of changes your routine and your daily DNA of what that looks like, that creates grief. I kind of came to the realization recently that I don't think everyone realizes, but hopefully they do. We're all grieving. We are literally all grieving. Like,
Yep.
If you're alive in this world right now, you're grieving because it's tough and life is hard and being a human isn't easy and it can feel devastating, tragic, alone. So I think helping identify that grief within ourselves is the start to healing ultimately, but also realizing that that grief isn't something that we're trying to exterminate.
Yes.
It's just something that becomes and then exists. And I think that's where our problem really lies too, is with the perception that we can get rid of grief, that it's like something we can heal completely and move on from. It's not an actual medical diagnosis. It's something deeper than that in our soul. So
it's so true. One of the best images I ever saw, like illustrations depicting grief, was it shows how the grief feels and looks and how big it is when it is brand new and it's taking up the entirety of your emotional and physical being. And then it shows like over time, the grief stays exactly the same size. It never ever changes. We like expand and grow around it. That's what that's what time does. Like we grow around it, but it's always there. It's always a part of us. And I agree, it's deep. It's a mark on our soul. You know, that's how deep it is. It's a mark on our soul, honestly. So tell us, so I'd love to kind of transition into like what you do. So tell us a little bit about what some of your commissions look like. What does that process look like when clients come to you? Kind of the conversations that you take place, and then what do you do to fulfill essentially what they're coming to you for?
So I just revamped my website. There's a service tab on my website that's kind of the point where people have been reaching out to me the most to get the conversation started. There has been kind of a flux of pre-planning, and I'm so here for it. Just, my pet is still with me, but they are getting older, and I just want to know my options. And I think that that's so amazing, and I support that completely, and hope that becomes more of a thing, because just like any other death and funeral services, in the moment, the emotions are so heightened. It's really hard to make clear decisions. So supporting people through planning, or then the body is transferred into my care. And depending on what the client wants, then that's kind of how we proceed forward. Like I was saying, it's been kind of interesting to see and hear all these unique requests that I'm like, wow, I didn't even think of that. But one of my most like popular services that I offer, I guess, or most used, is just the bone processing, where I use my beetles to break down the flesh to the bones, and then it's kind of arranged in a box. I actually have one here that I can just kind of like pop over if you wanted to see
please
it.
do. Yes,
One of my clients was a very unique request in itself too. But so he had a cat, and he had passed away, and all he wanted was some clay and ink prints and the pelt, like in the same sense of how you preserve a rabbit pelt, but for his cat. So that's been a new offering that I've moved into as well. So after that service was complete for him, he decided to donate the rest of the body to me. So Pockets is now my traveling cat that I use when I go into in-person places and kind of share what my services are. So all the bones, they get cleaned and just arranged in this box, and that's how it's presented. I also have done wet specimens for hearts. Like I said, I do clay and ink paw prints, nose prints. I have done articulation. I actually, so I started printing out these little booklets that I carry with me just to have some portfolio showcase work when I'm out in person, because it's kind of hard to bring myself to post everything just for normal reasons, but also them being someone's pets, it just kind of hits differently. And so kind of keep them a little private, more personal. But to showcase all the work that I am doing, I kind of landed on this. So this was one that I recently sent home. She was a small Shih Tzu dog, and I upcycled this box and then made it into this big shadow box for her. And I articulated the entire skeleton. And I mean, I've done paw removal. One of the memorials I sent home this past week was definitely one of my most, actually, they both were two of my most unique requests to this day. The first one, I had helped her earlier this summer to unearth her pet. She had her cat buried in her front yard for a few years, and she reached out and wanted my help to unearth her and to clean the bones and assemble them and put them in a nice box. And then I made an art piece with the skull. And so that was such an honor to be a part of that for her too, because it was just so unique and so spiritual and ritualistic in so many ways, and just of the earth, and from a science standpoint too, like the burial of an animal and then the decomposition of that was just so fascinating. So it was such an honor to have her trust for that. And then another client I had, she had reached out and her cat was being euthanized. So I kind of helped her through that part. And then once her pet had crossed over, he was transferred into my care, but all she wanted as a memorial was preserved paw, or I'm sorry, that was different. Was for me to remove the heart for a wet specimen and a microchip removal, and then the body was the rest of the remains were sent for cremation. And that one was very interesting. We had like a 2-day conversation first before I even agreed to it. I always try to be transparent and very thorough. I'm always amazed of how creative my clients can be, but I also want to know and make sure that they understand what it is they are asking for. And what I've been so grateful for is my clients' majority of understanding of the spiritual realm and the earthly realm, and how once their pet has crossed over, that what I'm dealing with and handling are just the earthly remains, and that their spirit has moved on, and I'm helping their earth form transition as well. And so it's just, I feel so grateful too with the clients that I've had. They're just so incredible and amazing and patient with me too. I am still a very much so one woman ran operation, but over the years, like I started mostly with doing markets and spreading the word and getting to know people and connecting with people. And I've definitely pulled away, and I continue to pull away because as this work starts to demand more energy and presence from me, I'm realizing that that is the cup that I want to fill. And once again, having to be mindful of like the energetic exchanges and just realizing, okay, so this worked for what I needed to, and now we're here and kind of just evolving with the business and the brand. And yeah, having to have that capacity to hold the space for this, because it's never an easy conversation. I never have a lighthearted conversation with my clients. You know, they're always heavy. They're always full of tears. But I feel so fulfilled. Like, I really feel that this is my life purpose. Like, I don't even I couldn't even tell you what I would be doing if I wasn't doing this, because this is definitely what I need to be doing. And that's why it's become so present to me to like do the work, internal, external, all the work you need to do to make this happen, really.
It's just, it's so powerful and so important. You know, it's really easy being programmed and hardwired, especially in Western culture. Of the entire world, we have some of the most just twisted, bad relationship with death in Western society. And you learn this if you start researching death practices in other cultures around the world, like current practices, let alone historical. And if you dig into our historical history of death practices, you start to understand some of where it got twisted. You know, we did a big giant series on here, a big 3-parter called Pluto Through the Generations. Jenny and I did. And it started as this idea that I had.
I love that series.
Oh, thank you. It's one of my favorite things I've ever done on the podcast ever. I had that idea living in me for like 2 years and was just like marinating and waiting. I was like the right guest, the right time. Like, I know this is big, which is so Plutonian in and of itself. Like, just bide your time, just wait. It's, this is bigger than you. And my whole idea behind it was this fascination I had, quite frankly. It was my own personal curiosity. I started to notice, you've got the natal Pluto placement in astrology, right? So like we look at our Pluto in Scorpio and you look at, what does that look like for the person you're reading for? But Pluto was in Scorpio when you were born. And when you were born, the adults and society were experiencing Pluto and Scorpio. And that was giving flavor to that very placement. And then we get older and we kind of see how it manifests later. So I got so obsessed with that I was like, I want to go back in time and kind of see that snowball. I want to see that progression, essentially. Well, what I didn't expect was to get to witness this history of our death culture and death customs in Western society. And, Jenny and I only even went back, but still, it's true. We only went back 250 years. Like, it's not that long in human history. We only went back a couple hundred years. And in the 1700s, funeral rites were not truly about honoring the person, but honoring their status, because we were so rooted in the class system and aristocracy still at that time. And Jenny and I learned in our research how many people families went broke for like the rest of their lives because they spent literally everything they had on a funeral. Especially if it was a head of household who died. And a woman who was not allowed to get a job after her husband or the father of her children died. It literally put her into poverty for the rest of her and her family's life. And then, as a way to improve this, the funeral industry becomes an industry. And there are more affordable options out there. And what's interesting is that I think that what started out as a solution to that bred its own breed of problems that started. And you had parts of the industry, and you're always going to have this because this is just human nature. You're going to have these bad seeds who utilize one of our most sacred experiences we go through as human beings, which is loss and grief, and have that exploited, right? They're exploited for that and taken advantage of. And people have been scammed out of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands plus dollars because of this, because it became an industry, it became a business. But what's really fascinating is that all throughout this time, what we really maintain, especially once we started getting into the 1900s into the 20th century, we started really shrouding death. We started really putting like sheets over everything. Before that, this is why we all kind of joke about like the pictures from the 1800s that people would pose their deceased loved ones for pictures and things like that. And we look back at that now and we're like, oh my God, how could you ever do that? And it really does go to show that for so many generations now, we've been putting this like cover over death, like putting this cover over it. Don't look at it. Don't talk about it. It's really, really interesting. And I have a theory that at least seems to be somewhat supported by our little Pluto exploration we did. I feel like a huge purpose of the Pluto and Scorpio generation is to bring a lot of healing to our relationship with death. I really do, because we are a generation who has a different relationship with it for the first time in many, many generations. If you start digging into it, my friends, and it's not hard to find. You've probably experienced this too, Sarah, where like, if you go looking for it, you start to see the people that are doing some incredible work in the death industry now, like really incredible healing and progressive work. The easy one that we all kind of know about that's gotten popular now is being buried as food for a tree, or as nutrients for plants, or in a garden. That's like this beautiful new option that people have available to themselves. When we lost Toots, it was unexpected. It was not, we were in the boat where we didn't have the ability to pre-plan anything. And if anything, we were in the boat of having to have like sudden acceptance. Like you have to like suddenly accept that this is what's happening, and it's happening right now. And you need to find a way to go about it. And I am so grateful for the ways that the death industry has improved over the last few decades, because we were very blessed to be able to afford and book very quick at-home euthanasia service with a private owned business out here. Person who reminds me very, very much of you. That is like, this is her calling. This is what she does and what she is meant to do. And I didn't even know you could do these, but the nose print ended up being, I had like a visceral reaction after she took the print and gave it to me. I'll never forget that moment ever. It even has her little tongue splotch on it, because her little tongue was so freaking giant for her mouth. It captured her. You know what I mean? I don't know how else to describe it. She handed that to me, and I'm pretty sure I made an audible sound when she handed it to me. And I was like, oh, because in that moment, just like you said, in that moment, everything is on volume 15. You know, all your feelings, everything, you can barely hear and take in anything that's going on. And I remember vaguely her asking, I do nose prints. Would you like a nose print? And I was like, yeah, yeah. And she handed it to me, and it like grounded me instantly in the moment.
So she does, I didn't even know that this was an option at all, but she, part of her process was talking to us just about her. And I assumed that she was just helping us emotionally accept, you know what I mean? Kind of what was going on in the moment. And she was. But what I didn't know was that she was taking in everything that we were saying and taking notes and wrote an obituary for us and mailed us this paw print and this dedication to her. And we were able to pay for a private cremation. These are things that you don't think about at all. That's the thing. You don't think about this stuff. And why would you? And why should you? You don't think about these things ahead of time. But all of a sudden, because of this inevitable law, right, of our life, death, it happens and occurs, and it's on your path, whether you saw it coming or not. And now you're faced with these choices. I remember having to have this conversation with Jared, again, kind of abruptly because of how quick everything had to take place. And I think that I made the assumption first that we were going to cremate her. And he said he had a previous, not bad, but not great experience. And he was like, they cremate all those pets together. I don't like that. I don't want that he's like, it's okay if that works for other people. That doesn't work for me. I want her and only her. We should bury her in the backyard. And to him, he's like, this is our home. She should be here in our home. And I instantly was like, absolutely not. And he was like shocked. And I was like, this isn't our forever home. You and I both know that one day this home's going to be too big for us and we're not going to be here anymore. I'm not leaving her here. And as soon as I said that, he was like, oh my God, I didn't even think about that. And honestly, everybody, the reason I'm sharing all these things is because you don't realize that these beautiful people like Cera are out there. And I want to talk about that these services are out there because they're incredible. They are filled with meaning and dedication for the loved one that you are either helping to cross over or you've already lost. In this particular case, we're talking about pets, but this does branch out into loss of people as well. There are so many more options now because for the first time, we're taking the sheets off. We're not saying that everything has to be hidden and not talked about, and we're not even just blowing up the stigma. We're asking, why does it exist in the first place? Like, what's the point of this? Who is this serving in the first place to treat it like this and to make it feel like you can't talk about it, when the truth is it's more about finding the right people to talk about it with. And so when you were talking about the process of anyone from people you've known in your personal life to clients who have just simply found you by researching and finding you on your website, you are absolutely correct that you are doing what you're meant to do, because it takes such a special kind of person to hold that space, because this is such a new form of death culture for us that most people can't or couldn't hold that type of space. And so my last question is, does this work? Is it ever really hard? I know that it's like so meaningful, of course. Is it ever hard? Are there parts of it that weigh on you in different times?
There is, definitely. I mean, the actual act of processing the animal, the pets, it's not necessarily something that I love to do. It's something that I know I have to get through to get to the other side for that transition. And I know that it's my responsibility now that I've made it. I definitely have to create a headspace for myself every time. Lots of grounding. Like I said, the internal work has really come to the forefront as a necessity for me to be able to do this work. I realized I was capable of it when I worked at the funeral home. That's when it came to my awareness of my capacities. And then that's where I wanted to explore it more of what felt right for me. But it's definitely hard. Because it's so reflective. It's a reflection of my own pain and my own grief. Like I've shared, my business was born out of death and is an outlet for my own grief. So in so many ways, this process is healing me too. But it's hard because I'm still dealing with those earthly elements. I'm still dealing with what's left. And that part's hard. That part I always have to talk myself through and get myself into a headspace of like, okay, we got to get through this. And then we do. But yeah, that definitely would probably be the hardest part.
I'm really glad that you're so candid and vulnerable about that, because I believe very strongly that there's a lot of people called to these or similar types of services and question if they're right for it because they're worried about that piece. And I don't know, you do a really good job of humanizing that part of it, that, of course that part is hard. And the purpose that you're serving is bigger than the hard. So do you have any advice, either, kind of like talking to your past self, which I think there's a lot of people listening to this that are in a very similar chapter, in a very similar place that you were in at the very beginning or before you got started? Do you have any advice for anybody wanting to get started following this calling? What would you have reminded yourself back then before you got started knowing what you know now?
That's so easy. And I love passing this message forward. It's removing the fear, whatever fear and whatever that looks like for you, for whatever direction you're trying to take moving forward, whatever it is, removing that fear and just moving forward towards that without fear. Some like bringing it to like a more understandable term. Like, say someone's they are over there nitpicking every detail about their website, and they're just like, I can't put it live until it has this, 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 and this, and this. And there's just this long list of things that is between you and your goal. Who made that list? You did. So who's ultimately between you and your goal? You are. So remove that. Remove all the pressure. It's not that big of a deal. It's not that serious. Just putting that first foot forward, which is literally like me talking and reminding myself right now as we move into 2026. But moving with that first foot forward towards what you're trying to accomplish or where you're trying to be, like that's all you need to do to start it. And I feel like it could ultimately be that first prevents you from ever getting there too. So just removing those barriers, removing those voices in your head, and just really going for it. Because ultimately, sure, you may not be pleased with where it's at or the presentation of it, but that's where over time you fine tune things, you learn things, you grow, you evolve. So by taking that first step, you're initiating and allowing yourself and saying to yourself in a way like, hey, it's okay. We're going to take this first step forward anyways. We're going to void the fear and the what ifs and just figure it out as we go. Because that's literally what the whole human experience is. So when it comes to something that's so deeply personal to us, just remove that fear, remove the barriers you're creating for yourself. Because I know we all do it. And that's ultimately probably like my biggest advice for everything, even dealing with your grief. Grief can be such a scary thing to start approaching, and how am I going to manage this? Because it does make it more real. But ultimately, the liberation you get from the other side, the feeling of proudness that you get for yourself just because you do these little things. And there are communities, like you're saying, it's starting. Like they're starting to pop up everywhere. The death cafes, I find just Zoom things that I can do all the time and hop on a call for pet loss, for parent loss, for suicide, for all sorts of things. And honestly, if anyone needs resources too, I have them and I will happily help and pass them forward too. It's about taking that first step, whatever that looks like for you.
So true. I knew this would be a good episode, but dang, still just blew past anything I could expect. I love our conversations. I always have. Cera, tell the people, where can we find you? Where can we follow you? How can we support you? What are you up to these days? How can we work with you?
Yeah, so I have my website. It's shopccoddities.com. It has my service tab, more information, frequently asked questions, more about me. And then there also is a tab that kind of sends you to some interviews and articles and from the past to kind of just familiarize yourself with me. I also have a podcast, Death Chats with Cera, which I've been kind of back and forth with, but definitely as we move forward, I want to nurture and love, and I would love support there. And I'm on Instagram at CC Oddities by Cera. I feel I'm not as amazingly active as I may have once been, but I still am there. It's still there. But I'd say my website is definitely a really great place to keep in touch, to reach out, to see what's new. I definitely tend often. So,
yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, my dear. This was like so good.
Thank you, Danny. It was amazing. I love you.
Oh, I love you too. Neighbor, thank you for your time today with us and for sharing in and holding this really sacred space with us today. I think that this is such an important conversation to have. Until I see you next time, make sure that you're out there staying safe. You're still letting yourselves have some fun. And of course, stay magical, my friend.
Hey, neighbor. Here with a super quick but super important reminder that I am currently running a spring enrollment special in That Witch School. If you thought that you missed out on the opportunity to get into That Witch School at a slammin' price, fear not, my friend. Right now, you can lock in your membership with us at 50% off of our regular enrollment prices. All the same benefits and perks. This applies to anyone who's never been in That Witch School before, and this applies to previous members, and this applies to current members. This is an excellent opportunity to upgrade your membership for less money. This is also a great opportunity to downgrade your membership, but stay with us, especially if you need to kind of tighten up on finances right now. This is also a wonderful time to get in with this incredible, fun, welcoming, supportive community with a billion resources for the lowest price you can get, my friend. It is a slammin' deal. You can learn lots more about That Witch School at thatwitchschool.com, and also here on That Witch podcast, and also on my social media and YouTube and all my platforms. If you have any questions, I'm always just right next door. Join us at thatwitchschool.com.